It is, of course, Halloween, and if you were with us for our Ghostwatch earlier, may I reassure you that it was just a story, and all's well here at Television Centre.
It's Saturday the 31st of October 1992 and the BBC are preparing the schedule for their flagship Saturday evening entertainment. In the UK specifically, Saturday evenings on the main TV channels are characterised with many game shows, variety shows and just general entertainment.
Come in, Blobby, come in.
But usually past the 9 PM hour, the schedule shifts more to drama, medical drama Casualty usually taking centre stage. But across its history, the BBC has become known, at least in the UK, for running many different anthology strands for single dramas. Programmes like Play for Today, and in this case, Screen 1 come to mind. It allowed British actors, directors and writers to have a prime-time opportunity to tell a story, and sometimes create legacies that can last until the present day through those stories told. Meanwhile, Welsh screenwriter Stephen Volk already had an established career in horror in the 80s, and after achieving adequate success writing for various films, he wanted to go bigger.
These teenage sisters believe they're haunted by a poltergeist.
I was going to ask the same question as I asked earlier. How many voices are there?
600.
600 the voices.
I know the joke.
How many really are there, Margaret?
I think so far we've had 10
Three.
sensible voices, but the rest of the names are absolute rubbish.
Between 1977 and 1979, the Enfield poltergeist supposedly possessed the house of 284 Green Street, and more specifically, two of its children, Janet and Margaret Hodgson. Various activity was reported and investigated by demonologists, paranormal experts, and journalists until eventually the media frenzy died down. In the end, a skeptic may view the whole case like this. But the case and associated contemporary documentary helped inspire Stephen Volk into developing a drama based on it. In 1988, 4 years prior to the final show, a 6-part serial was pitched to the BBC following a TV journalist investigating the supernatural. But subsequently, the concept was revised to cut down the story from a more conventional narrative into just a live broadcast, focusing on the investigation of ghosts and no additional story preceding or following it. Fronted similarly to daytime discussion programs, Stephen and the director Leslie Manning wished to take as many steps to ground the show and preserve, and you'll hear this word come up a lot, realism. The main presenting team were all well-known personalities from the era. Michael Parkinson was regarded as the most popular and most liked talk show host in the country, and his formal yet charming style captured contemporary audiences, and he was going to be the host. Sarah Green presented children's shows Blue Peter, I Still Have My Badge, and Going Live, which produced this infamous clip.
Okay, Elliot, what's your question?
I'd like to ask 5-star where they're so fucking crap, they're fucking...
Thanks very much, Elliot.
Mike Smith was Sarah's husband and also a presenter, him managing the phone-in. And Craig Charles portrayed Dave Lister in sitcom Red Dwarf, also having an excitable, bubbly personality fit for an on-site interviewer. These were well-known, trusted figures, especially to impressionable children. Parkinson was put on the front cover of the Radio Times, the magazine for TV listings, which inside stated that the show would be a drama. But not everyone read it. As night fell on Halloween 1992 at 9:25 PM, the continuity announcer turns on his microphone.
Now, on BBC One, Screen 1 presents an unusual and sometimes disturbing film marking Halloween.
He said it's a film. It's fine. Right? Right?
The programme you're about to watch is a unique live investigation of the supernatural. It contains material which some viewers may find to be disturbing.
Mum! 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 Oh, Mum, it's back! It's back! Mum! 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 Off me! Off me! Don't touch me! Don't touch me!
Okay, well, it's not the scariest thing of all time, and is amplified by the cheesy intro and stock spooky music that follows it. However, in the studio beside the massive fireplace is a doctor of psychology, Lynn Pascoe, and a manned switchboard alongside this number. If you call it now...
Please check the number. If you need help,
Call the operator on 100 from your mobile.
Shut the fuck! You won't get an answer. But back in the early 90s, this number was primarily used by kids shows for competitions and other interactivity. The house is established as being on Fox Hill Drive and lived in by a mother and her two daughters, Suzanne and Kim. Sarah, as the main reporter, is followed by a skeleton crew of one handheld camera with an infrared thermal filter and a boom mic operator. In real life, these two were portrayed not by actors but by real technicians that worked at the BBC to provide legitimate technical accuracy to the programme. Another realistic factor to the show was the long length that some scenes go on for, with no cuts, awkwardly directed camera angles and weird timing.
You know, at the beginning, when you showed the real footage of that haunted bedroom, I was sure I could see a figure standing behind against the wall, just by the curtain.
Yeah.
Very, very vague, but definitely a figure there.
If you rewind to the start of the film, such a figure isn't there. But when the footage is shown again in the studio, there is something there. For confirmation, the footage is rewound again and it's not there anymore. While the footage you see in the studio was only recorded a few weeks before the final transmission, the footage on the monitors, more so on location, was actually filmed in the summer of 1992 during a heatwave. The director had placed decorations in and around the house, not even knowing if the final product would be broadcast on the night of Halloween. Although still following a script, Michael and Dr. Lynn were interacting with Sarah and Craig in simulated real time. Now some backstory. The mother describes how the paranormal activity the girls experience is a thudding or knocking noise, leading him to be given the name Mr. Pipes. This is in reference to how hydraulic shock in plumbing leads to a knocking sound, similar to that described by the girls. One of the kids, Kim, claims Pipes lives in the cupboard under the stairs, referred to as
the glory holes, we used to call it when I was a kid.
The mother, called Pam, testifies how she had experienced numerous traumatic experiences herself, been refused help by the local council, and instead turned to the media to publicise her story. A tape is then played in studio of an alleged encounter with the ghost, with a voice supposedly coming from one of the kids.
Window above the sink's just been shattered now. There's no... Oh my God! There's a chair. Mom! Yes, it's coming towards you, Mom! Across the kitchen floor, I don't know. Oh dear God, Susan. Who are you? What's your name? I smell blood.
Bizarre.
The Pipes nickname can further be verified, as breakages of fragile items were attributed to changes in temperature rather than just simply dropping it on the floor. Another factor of realism about the film is that the full broadcast is exactly 90 minutes long, so to pad time, there is filler. Sarah tells a few uninteresting stories and engages in activities with the kids, and Dr. Lynn argues with a skeptic, but at the same time, clocks begin to stop and the temperature becomes freezing cold. Craig, not taking the show entirely seriously by saying "Boo!"
I bet that scared you, didn't it?
Interviews various locals about their experiences with ghosts. The feed cuts back to the house, with audible banging and drawings strewn across the floor.
Can we pan left? And down.
Okay.
Suzanne, are you okay? You all right? Come on.
It wasn't me!
It doesn't matter.
It
doesn't matter.
Parkinson almost immediately draws conclusions to the whole thing just being a hoax, despite Dr. Lynn's defending protests and Suzanne's uncontrollable crying. Snap back to reality. Here's where it all goes wrong. The phone number provided earlier and promoted all throughout the film was fitted with an automatic playback tape, reassuring callers that the program was a drama, before then allowing the viewer to state their own story. Of course, these wouldn't have been able to be broadcasted given the pre-recorded nature unbeknownst to viewers, but because of the sheer volume of callers, the tape jammed. If you called, you wouldn't just get through, you now would have been given nothing, no context. The limitations of the technology turned a fantasy to reality for millions.
My children are frightened. Why are you doing this?
Now, look, I'm sure your children are in shock. also want to say, I think it's high time probably that your kids were in bed. I mean, it is past the 9 o'clock watershed, isn't it?
That's it. That's just it. They won't go to bed. I can't drag them away from the TV. I tell them to look what time it is, but the clock still shows 9:30.
Suzanne develops scratch marks across her entire face, and while Parkinson still affirms that she may have done it to herself with her own fingernails, the crew think it's best to just get the kids out of the house.
Just outside. We going? Come on. Downstairs. Just outside.
Mike explains how there's more calls than he can count and how dozens upon dozens of people are reporting sightings and occurrences in vain to what the family in Foxhall Drive are going through. Cut back to the house, and the microphone feedback pollutes the audio.
It's making terrible noise. I don't know what's going on. There are incredible noises coming from the walls and from the ceiling. Ah! Oh. Susie. Stop it! Stop it, Susie!
Get out if you don't want to be here. I don't care. You just mess things up. You mess everything up. I hate you.
After the sound of cats are traced to the cupboard under the stairs, the door barricades are torn down. Cut back to the studio, and an anonymous phone call provides seemingly vital details into the history of the house. A mentally disturbed man named Raymond Tunstall, convicted for molestation and aggravated abuse, developed paranoid fantasies and later took his own life to escape it. The location of his death was under the stairs, and he was surrounded by his pet cats, who subsequently ran out of food and had to resort to feeding on other sources to survive. Similar to the real world, the in-universe switchboard jams, and the feed from inside the house becomes glitched and isn't live. Craig starts to look noticeably panicked, and an ambulance and the police is called outside the house while wind develops inside the studio, Dr. Lynn commenting,
Jesus, Michael, we've created a seance. A massive seance.
It's pitch black in the house. Lights out. The only people remaining are Sarah and the cameraman, the thermal mode, the only perspective available.
Susie? Susie?
Sarah? Sarah?
Lights blow out, cameras shift on their own, the link cuts, crew evacuate, all while Parkinson looks on in confusion. And when everyone goes, he remains eerily calm.
There's cameras, but I don't know which one's working. I mean, the autocue's working. Round and round the garden, like a teddy bear.
And that was that. You might have assumed that because it was Halloween, on a Saturday no less, only more mature audiences would be tuning in, but no, the final figure for viewership was 11.07 million.
My 11-year-old son was left shaking and physically sick after 10 minutes. Prior warning should have been given, so we had some idea of what was to come.
And the BBC should be locked up for such a prank. I guessed halfway through it was a hoax, but people do live in haunted houses. They're frightened enough without being ridiculed by Michael Parkinson.
Or, if you prefer, MP Parker of Dorset.
An arrogant and clumsy dissection of the paranormal, prejudiced for the trivial purpose of providing family entertainment. A sick joke.
Although never intended to be a prank or hoax, the BBC was inundated with complaints, somewhere in the region of 20 to 50,000. Watching it nowadays on a YouTube video with my commentary no less seriously doesn't do the film justice for the sheer power it had on its original broadcast in 1992. Then, tragedy struck. 18-year-old Martin Denham took his own life. My content specifically focuses on celebrating the legacy that good media leaves behind, but this incident overshadows the programme in a depressing way. Living with severe learning difficulties and a low mental age, his home had a similar issue with his heating pipes as described in the show, causing them to knock, leading him to believe that the type of ghost portrayed was real. 5 days after the broadcast, he wrote how if ghosts were real, he would finally be with them. Where the War of the Worlds' impact was an urban legend, Ghostwatches became suddenly real. Inadvertent failure and the lack of hindsight into the what-ifs of the realism led to the worst possible outcome. This is why any time the news comes on in a drama, it would always be from a different angle pointed at a TV or somehow distorted to prevent anyone from randomly tuning in and suddenly believing it with no context. Even now in 2024, and let's not even talk about AI. It became one reason why Ghostwatch became part of a small club of media to be tightly restricted by the BBC, and to this day it still has not been repeated on mainstream television or made available to stream on their iPlayer service, receiving no sort of formal recognition in the years since. Although not live at all, the technical feats achieved to warp trusted figures into characters and highlight just how linear TV can influence certain people cannot be denied, and it still has an effect even when watching it now when we're 25 plus years past the 4:3 aspect ratio. Unless you're an edgy filmmaker. The director, Leslie Manning, said, "We wanted to expose the power of TV and suggest you shouldn't believe everything you see on TV. And in an age where TV becomes more a trusted source than ever as social media and the internet devolve into a mess, as long as we're cautious, maybe we'll be fine." Just don't get nightmares.